Lot of talk about Luigi Mangione, the suspected killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, but with mounting evidence, what is going to be his legal defense? And with so much outpouring of support, does he even need one? Hey, so before we jump into the story, I have a major announcement for you. The video version of Sidebar is now available on Spotify. That's right. We are so thankful for your guys' support of Sidebar and us getting the show on Spotify video. It is truly due to how loyal this audience is. So thank you so much. And yes, you can now watch and listen on the go, from the United Healthcare murder updates to Diddy, Jay-Z, crazy court moments. It's all on Spotify now. So right now, you can scan the QR code on screen, click the link in the description to follow Sidebar on Spotify. Here's a question for you. What will be Luigi Mangione's legal defense? It's interesting, right? It's interesting because there seems to be a significant amount of evidence against the 26-year-old suspected shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was gunned down on the morning of December 4th outside of the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. And it was last week when NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch announced at a press conference in Staten Island that fingerprints found on a water bottle and this protein candy bar near the crime scene matched those taken from Mangione when he was booked into jail in Pennsylvania. Also, the gun found in Mangione's possession during his arrest has been matched to shell casings recovered from the shooting scene. The surveillance images taken from New York, I'm talking about the unmasked photo of the suspect at a hostel that he may have been staying at, the Starbucks before the shooting, at the crime scene, in a taxi after the shooting, they are what may have led to an identification in the McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where Mangione was ultimately arrested. And it's even been reported by ABC that Mangione's own mother, Kathleen Mangione, spoke with the FBI the day before he was arrested, and that she even indicated that he could be the CEO killing suspect based on those surveillance photos, although she wasn't 100% sure. But I'm talking about the evidence here. And then he was found with fake IDs, including allegedly giving police in Altoona a fake New Jersey driver's license that authorities believe is the same one that was used to check into the hostel days before the shooting. This is according to CBS. And then, of course, how could I not talk about the manifesto and the notebook, these writings that were found when he was arrested. Writings that allegedly say, to the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. Regarding United Healthcare, saying that it's grown and grown, but has our life expectancy. No, the reality is these have simply gotten too powerful and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit. And according to CNN and ABC, there was also this passage about apparently deciding not to use a bomb because that would kill too many innocent people and that a shooting would be more targeted. And also, what about this alleged statement? What do? You whack the CEO at the annual parasitic bean counter convention. But there has been this overwhelming support for Mangione amongst a certain segment of the population. And you talk about defense. I mean, an online effort to raise money for his legal defense on a crowdfunding site has reached over $130,000. Yeah. Social media users on TikTok and Instagram, they are praising him, hailing him as a hero. Social media users on a crowdfunding site has reached over $130,000. Yeah. Social media users on TikTok and Instagram, they are praising him, hailing him as a hero, and also, I guess for a lack of a better phrase, fanning over pictures of him. You know, Bop to the Top Tour's Jingle Bop that was held at the Big Night Live venue in Boston, it was just a few days ago. The DJ puts up on the screen pictures of Mangione, and the crowd starts cheering and going nuts. One of the clips was shared on TikTok, has over 1.2 million likes. Online support for the CEO murders apparently raising concerns of increased violence, copycat attacks. This is according to a newly released report from the Center for Internet Security. That report, obtained by CNN, warned that online discourse surrounding Brian Thompson's killing is emboldening individuals with violent intentions, especially against the healthcare industry and corporate America. So it makes me wonder, after hearing everything, will a jury even convict him? What could be his legal defense? Assuming you get a fair and impartial jury, though, what would be his legal defense? And that's what gets really interesting. Is there a challenge to the evidence? Is it a mental health defense? Is it
That's an interesting shot. Was he mid-blink?
An appeal to the juror's sympathy? By the way, as I hope you know, here on Sidebar, we don't try to put a spin on anything. We try to deliver balls and strikes with these stories, like with Mangione, just the facts. And that is why we are thrilled to partner with a company like Straight Arrow News, which is an app and website that is focused on objective, unbiased reporting. As somebody who is always doing research for Sidebar, I know how easy it is to get lost in biased journalism. But Straight Arrow News helps us cut through that with tools like the media landscape, which shows where outlets fall on the political spectrum, the media mist tool, highlighting stories that mainstream media might be skipping. So check it out for yourself for free by going to san.com/sidebar or click the link in the description. Supporting them means supporting journalists like us committed to delivering the truth. I want to bring on right now criminal law attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer to talk more about this. Safa, thanks so much for coming on. I want to focus primarily on the New York charges, not necessarily the Pennsylvania charges, because although those are serious, forgery, firearms offenses, it's really the most serious charges are in New York. Second-degree murder, weapon possession, and forgery charges.
Just so many weird circumstances revolving
we get into the legal defenses. Do you think there's a real possibility of jury nullification at either the grand jury or trial level, meaning the jury doesn't decide this on the facts or the evidence, but emotion, sympathy, their anger against the healthcare industry? What do you think?
Well, that's certainly a possibility, but that's always something that we look to avoid as attorneys, and especially as the prosecution and the defense begin to present their cases. One of the things that they're going to do during the voir dire process when they interview these jurors or potential jurors is they're going to ask them, will you keep sympathy out of your deliberations? That is a question that is always asked during jury selection, and it's generally asked by both sides. Each side, the prosecution and defense, want to ensure that the jury is not going to lean on sympathy to either bring about a conviction or to acquit the individual that's charged.
I don't know.
There's not a thorough jury selection process in grand juries, right? Grand juries, it's basically like, do you want to serve in this grand jury now, or do you want to come back in 6 months? So I remember I served on a grand jury. There was no voir dire. They didn't ask if I knew any of the defendants in the cases that I was covering. It was just, is there enough to indict? And, you know, I wonder if you have
like the mobile
New
phone picture or cell, as in
some of them feel some sympathy
cell
towards what the alleged shooter did here. In a trial, the defense can't say he did the right thing. The health insurance industry is killing people. He took a stand. He, you know, it was a symbolic stand.
My issue is that he doesn't really look like the guy. Like, it looks like there was like 3 different guys.
And killing Brian Thompson, that's not a legal defense,
they look,
right?
They always they look different in every photo or something.
That won't be the judge wouldn't allow
or every
that, right?
image.
No. But what could happen though is that when you have jury selection, you have jurors that come in and they have all types of different.
Like I wonder if he was hired. You know what I mean?
Jurors there, you know,
or if
they
were
had
hired,
negative experiences with
you know
insurance
what I mean?
companies.
Because like people made a lot of money from
this. To the jury room, to jury selection,
and I feel like
jurors aren't as
not to say that
transparent as we would
not
like
to say that he's like innocent by any means, not at all. I just think that we need to stop like pinning it on like one person, like okay, that's guilty and that's it, case closed, right? Because what if it goes deeper than that? If it goes deeper than that and you just say, "Oh wait, we got the guy, case closed," then, you know, this stuff is going to keep happening. MK Ultra.
To be. So there could be a situation
could be
where
that.
We have maybe one or a few rogue jurors who believe in this cause that this individual
when he was put in his jail cell. I didn't see that.
Why.
I think, you know what, you might be right about MK Ultra, because there's no like he's dead. I feel like in these photos where he's yelling, like you know when they took him and he's like yelling blah 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 blah. What does he say? Something about the intelligence of the American people. It's like an insult or whatever, insult to the intelligence of the American people or something. But then I'm looking at this photo, it's like a still of when he's yelling it, I think. And you would think that he's like really angry, but there's no anger behind his eyes. It's just like nothing. It's almost as if he's just yelling the lines he was meant to yell. Like, wouldn't he have more expression in his face? Like, this is weird. But then again, it could be a sign of like, I don't know, like the hardships that he went through with his mom or something, like, I don't know, or like, I don't know. You guys, here, I'll show you which photo I'm talking about. I feel like, right, like, there's no, he sounds angry, but there's no anger behind these eyes. Like, he's not furrowing his brows, like, he's just, like, dead, like, so weird. So he went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania.
He allegedly did what he did.
Yeah, there could be stealth jurors, right? They say all the right things to go onto that jury, but they really have different intentions. I mean, I imagine it also will be an effort, even probably by prosecutors, to do background research on these jurors, right? To look at their social media.
That's a good point. Like how are they gonna get unbiased jurors? That's gonna be hard.
You can do that, right?
That's interesting.
Absolutely. While we're picking our jurors, we oftentimes will have someone who's assisting us.
Because it's like I feel like most people choose a side. You're either on the side of the people who think he's a hero, or you're on the side of people who think he's like guilty and deserves, you know, what he deserves. So how are you gonna like find actual, like, you know, the unbiased ones? Like, that's hard. Like, that's
our juror selection specialist, and we're plugging in each and every name of every potential juror. We're
they're probably not they may not get any Gen Zers on the jury. Actually, it depends. So like, because each has to choose what type of, like, each has to choose the juror, like, if they want the juror, right? So the prosecution side, and then like the defendant side, right? So the prosecution side is probably not gonna want like younger Gen Z type generation on the jury, whereas Luigi's side, they probably will want those people who, you know, think he's a hero on their side, on the jury. So it's gonna be like, I think the jury selection is gonna take a really long time. I don't know if there's a cap on, like, or a limit, like it has to be done in this, you know, these many days or whatever, but I have a feeling it's like, if there's no limit, I feel like it's gonna take a long time.
We have the juror questionnaire, so we're judging essentially.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. Like, that's kind of how it works in the Canadian system.
If they're married, if they have any religious views. One of the interesting things that we find oftentimes is that a lot of people who have certain religious views don't like to pass judgment on other people. So as a defense attorney, that's great for us, because we don't want a situation where the juror is going to pass judgment on our client and that judgment be of guilty. So there's a lot of things that go into jury selection process. We are looking at social media.
How do you know for sure? How can you be so sure it's not
for our side?
So putting aside, let's say you get a fair and impartial jury for both sides here. Okay, now we have to talk actual, legitimate legal defense.
I'm asking you now.
I'm going to go through a few of them. I want your perspective.
Stacey, how
you doing? First is, how do you get rid of this evidence? So the fingerprint evidence, the ballistics, the surveillance. Is there a way to strike at that evidence? Is there a way for it to not come in, or strike at the reliability of that evidence? Talk about what some arguments we can expect to see from the defense. Maybe not only at trial, but going into trial. You know, motions leading up to trial.
Oh, there we go. See, that has more emotion in the eyes. That looks more humanistic,
quickly and
humanoid
before we even see a trial.
That looks
these
more
pieces
human
of evidence. What's going to happen, or what I expect that the defense is going to do, is during the motion period where we request certain legal relief, they're going to have to challenge how this evidence was obtained. If there was a search warrant, they're going to have to challenge the validity of that search warrant, and if there was probable cause to obtain that search warrant.
If there is no search warrant, and I believe there probably is, I'm assuming,
considering the facts as we know them
Canada
to be at this moment.
For state, would the illegals get amnesty based off of No, I think that Trump would also, like, I think that, like, the deportations would still happen, and, like, because Canada has the same issue you guys do, and I'm not trying to say that immigrants are an issue. What I'm trying to say is that the government created an issue when they brought in so many people that that there was no infrastructure for, you know, and there was no money for, because there was already a war going on and there was already inflation and all that kind of shit. So like, why are you on top of it doing this? Why? Because it's all on purpose. And now they literally do whatever the fuck they want. Take all your money, do whatever the fuck they want, including sending drones up above. For what the fuck? Like, and they've been doing it for a long time.
To a lawful arrest, challenging those.
And there's more that they're doing that you guys don't even know.
Things. When Mr. Mangione was taken into custody, what was located on him that would have been an exception to the search warrant requirement that we have here. Not only that, but as we continue to go forward, we're also going to be challenging the reliability of these pieces of evidence. There is a way that evidence needs to be moved in.
Oh, I don't know, guys. All I know is everything's fucked.
It has to be properly authenticated. So whatever video footage was obtained from in this incident, where it was obtained from, how it's stored, is it stored in the
like there's an immigration process for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, they did this all on purpose.
Ordinary course of business for whatever company may have had that footage that the government obtained from them. All of those things have to be challenged, and all of those things have to be perfected at trial. At trial, there has to be a foundation that is set,
I don't know,
so
like,
that these pieces of evidence can come in. So this video footage can come in.
I don't know.
So anything
I don't
that was
feel like I have
obtained
skin in the game when it comes to that topic, or maybe I do.
There has to be a proper foundation that is laid so that those things
know.
can even come in.
I always thought that was
that the defense is going
universal.
to attack the ability for the prosecution to bring those things in early on.
Yeah, it's interesting. There were search warrants in this case for, you know, the backpack, the phone that was collected. I think there was also one for the hostel. But, you know, look, it seems to me the difficulty for the defense was timeline of everything, right? So first they collected the backpack and the phone, the things that were at the scene, which it seems like law enforcement would have a right to do. And the fingerprints were only matched up to the items at the scene once he was in custody. So they took his fingerprints and matched it. And then the ballistics were matched to the weapon that he had on him. Do you think that might be difficult to say, you know, it wasn't handled correctly? Maybe their best avenue is to say, when it comes to the fingerprints of the ballistics, this is not a true science. The science is a little wonky.
Like, in my opinion, if a virus breaks out, but you know, not on purpose. Like, I feel like this was potentially on purpose. But like, just like let it take its course. You know what I mean? Like, they were all about herd immunity, but meanwhile, they didn't actually want herd immunity because they wanted everyone to be separate. Like, just let it take its course then.
Handled, like, it was mishandled and maybe contaminated? What do you think?
Absolutely, most definitely.
It's
and
mostly
one of the
vegan,
arguments that the prosecution is actually going to make with respect to this backpack is that it was abandoned property.
It's got nice
that
big
once he left it on the sidewalk or
I
got
think
rid
the
of
cream
it, that
has
it's
milk in
abandoned,
it.
that he no longer has standing to
I don't know what the
challenge
cream is
the
made of.
evidence at that point, or what was ultimately obtained at that point. With respect to the evidence in terms of fingerprint testing and ballistics, the defense is going to have to hang on to that scientific, you know, challenging the science behind it. What people don't often realize, although in this case we do believe that there have been fingerprints that were located,
you can
is
look
that
an
not
American
often
without
do we
portion.
find that there are fingerprints or DNA on firearms. In fact, the grips of the firearms or certain types of firearms that are made are actually to prevent fingerprints from being placed onto that firearm. Doesn't appear to be the case here, but all of those things are taken into consideration as the cases proceed and how you build your prosecution or your defense and things like that.
That's a really, really good point. And real quick about the surveillance footage.
Sometimes I eat
Would they
poutine.
say, hey, how can you definitively say this is Mangione in the surveillance footage? It's grainy unless they use some sort of technology to enhance the photo. A lot of times the person's covered. So maybe they would say, you know, that's not the same person in the hostel as the same person in the taxi. Is that ways to try to say that it's not who the government believes it is?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things the defense is also going to want to do here is challenge the identification. In order for the prosecution to meet its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, one of the things they have to prove is that this particular person on this time, date, and place committed this specific act. suspect. And they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was this person, in this case, Mr. Mangione. And so the defense should be picking away at each and every moment that led up to this incident with Mr. Mangione, and also raising and creating doubt with respect to that. Now, it may be difficult considering the layout of events and in totality, or taken in totality of the circumstances, the evidence could appear that it is essentially him. But they're still going to have to pick away at it. They have to do everything that they can to protect their client, protect their client's interests, and challenge the evidence every step of the way.
How do you fight against the writings that I mentioned? Do you say it wasn't him who wrote it? Or yes, he wrote it, but he didn't actually confess to the killing? It can be interpreted multiple ways. Is that how you fight against that? Or is there a way to make sure those writings aren't even admitted into trial?
That's where we're going, is we're going to ensure, or hopefully ensure, that those writings don't come into trial. First, back to that motion period and challenging the search warrant, or however that writing was obtained, we're going to first challenge that there. After the motion period, more than likely, and in this case, there will be what we call suppression hearings. And those are hearings, sort of like a mini trial that take place, where the law enforcement officers are going to get on the stand and testify.
Wait, is this where he peed himself? Is this where he peed himself? Hold on. Is this where he peed himself?
Going to get on this hearings, sort of like a mini.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you guys mean? Like, it was the stain on the floor or his
trial
pants?
That take place where the law enforcement officers are going to get on the stand and testify as to how they obtained that search warrant, how they executed that search, and things of that nature. And so the important thing there is going to be to exploit and show any illegality of police conduct. Holding on to the alleged fact or possible fact that the police did something illegal, and as a result of that illegal activity, this piece of evidence should be suppressed. And so that's where the defense is going to want to go with that. If those writings stay in, then there's an ability to challenge it at trial.
I just feel like he doesn't really look like the guys
again, with the proper foundation being laid for that to come in, and challenging that on the defense aspect. Also saying, well, you don't really know who wrote these. You weren't there. You didn't see him write it. You've never met him before. You've never seen him write anything before. So you really don't know that is him. So it's not the strongest defense with respect to that, but that's certainly something that they could explore, among other things.
All right. So now, assuming that all comes in, assuming there's no denial that he's the shooter, what are the other defenses? Well, now let's talk mental health. So there has been a lot of talk about insanity. And essentially it would be, yes, Luigi Mangione shot Brian Thompson, but he's not criminally responsible. And I've seen talk about this. I don't necessarily believe it, but let's go through it. So my understanding under New York law is a person lacks criminal responsibility if they have a mental disease or defect, when at the time of
I
this
know his testimony
crime,
says it. It's
as
just
a result
weird.
of that mental disease or defect, that person lacks
he's also a
substantial
murderer.
capacity
You
to know or appreciate
you're gonna
either
believe every word
the
he
nature
says
and consequences of what
you
they
know
were
what
doing,
I mean? It's like
or
you
that
could
such
believe everything he
conduct or what
wrote,
they were doing
but he
was
also
wrong.
is a murderer.
Now,
so like,
again, this idea, he did it, but he really couldn't appreciate the wrongfulness
I just feel like
of his
I like
actions.
to
He
question
didn't appreciate
everything.
what he
That's
was
all.
doing. Do you think that applies here? Because I could make arguments that
to
he
act like
sure
I know
did
everything,
know
even though I
what he
kinda
was
do
doing,
act
assuming
like I
it
know
was
everything.
Luigi Mangione.
But like,
wearing
I
a
try
mask,
to be
avoiding detection, holding a Faraday bag that
self-aware and
conceals
mindful
or blocks
that
cell phone
I don't know
communications,
everything.
trying to get out of there. It would all seem to suggest he knew that he was committing a crime and didn't want to get caught. Ghost gun that couldn't really be tracked. Again, that's why I feel like insanity wouldn't apply, but maybe I'm wrong.
Remember that NASA
No, I don't think it's going to apply here. They can certainly attempt to raise it, but the reality is, taking a look at all of the evidence and the totality of the circumstances, I don't think that that's going to be the case here. And again, they can certainly raise it if they feel that that they'd like to do that, and present a psychiatric defense, get their psychiatrist expert or whoever they're going to call in to testify about his mental state at that time. Also, while this matter is pending, there is a possibility to do what we call a 730 order, and that essentially checks to see the mental capacity and competency of an individual and their ability to aid in their defense. But considering that these acts appear to be premeditated, appear to be well thought out and planned, I don't think that a psychiatric defense is going to be the saving grace here on the defense.
By the way, just going back to
the Pacific Ocean in 2030.
Is that something that is
going
petitioned by the defense?
Send a tsunami
and does the
or something?
prosecution have an attempt to put in their own experts to evaluate Mangione? How does it work?
With a 730 order, oftentimes we as defense attorneys will make that request when we question the psychiatric nature or the mental health nature of our clients at that time. Sometimes we have these conversations with prosecutors and the prosecutor will agree, like, yeah, it seems that there's something going on here. Go ahead and order it. Sometimes they will oppose it, but it will ultimately be up to the judge to allow for that to go through. More often than not, they do, in the abundance of caution. And you don't want any issues on appeal either. So what happens is if the person's in custody, there's a psychiatrist through the institution that they're housed in that will perform that evaluation. The prosecutors are aware of it as well. I've never had a prosecutor actually submit their own evaluator, and they're not even often paid for by us if the individual is in custody. It's done through the state, and they will make the determination on whether or not that person is competent in trial.
See, look, I just think it's interesting when we talk about mental health because he had these outbursts leading up to his extradition hearing. He tried to speak in court. His writings or his alleged writings could be a bit erratic. But while I don't think insanity would necessarily work, I did want to ask you about extreme emotional disturbance. So there is a way to downgrade murder to manslaughter, which I understand could be 5 to 25 years in prison, very different than second-degree murder, which could be up to life in prison. So this extreme emotional disturbance, that a defendant had emotional disturbance that was so extreme that he couldn't control himself, that the reason for it has to be reasonable. And you test reasonableness by putting a person in the defendant's shoes under those circumstances as the defendant believed them to be. And he had to have killed under the influence of this extreme emotional disturbance. I think a classic example would be, right, a husband comes home, finds his wife cheating, goes downstairs, gets a gun, comes back upstairs and kills them. Yes, you could say intentional murder, but also maybe acting under an extreme emotional disturbance. Do you think that may apply here at all?
I don't think that's going to apply here. This seems to be such a well thought out act, or for lack of a better way to put it, well thought out act, where he planned this, or he allegedly planned this. He had the proper equipment. He had identifications that to attempt to conceal his identity. He fled after this took place, which there's an argument for consciousness of guilt with respect to that act. And so I don't think that the extreme emotional disturbance or crime of passion is going to really apply here. This isn't a situation where, he caught his partner cheating. This isn't a situation where he's murdering somebody to protect a child or his child.
He even posted a video
stranger
saying,
to stranger,
if you see this, I've been arrested already. Everything is
in the public,
scheduled
and it appears
or something.
again to
So it was
be
just
a
weird.
thought out, methodical plan to do this.
Does he take...
What about his YouTube video? Nobody ever fucking mentioned a YouTube video. Not to say that that really makes a difference, but it certainly added to the conspiracy, like, you know what I mean? Like that he was working with someone or something. Or this was all planned.
Stand? Does he testify at trial?
Absolutely not. He has a right to remain silent, and he should certainly use it if he were to take the stand at trial. And certainly when you have homicides in particular, the jury wants to know both sides. They're very curious about what happened. And so they would like for, our clients or the defendant to testify. But in reality, if Mr. Mangione were to testify, I think he's going to get crucified on the stand by prosecutors. They already have enough evidence to seek a conviction potentially. He doesn't need to give them any more ammunition to do that. And if he were to testify or get on the stand and testify, what could he say at this point other than it wasn't me? And they're going to say, well, you did this on this date, you had these IDs, these were what were located with you. So it's going to be really difficult for him to get around that. I don't think that he's going to testify. I don't think that he should testify.
It's his choice, though. It's his choice. Even if his attorneys don't want him to do it, he might do it. But I wanted to ask you before we wrap up one more quick question about defense. So New York attorney Colleen Kerwick told Newsweek that she believes that Thomas Dickey, who's his lawyer representing him in Pennsylvania, and we know that Karen Friedman Agnifilo is representing him in New York, but Thomas Dickey might be using extradition hearings because at the time of this broadcast, there's still a debate about extradition, about how he's going to be extradited back to New York if he's fighting extradition. that he might be using extradition hearings to test out
How is it
legal
not important?
defenses.
Like, that's
Do you think that makes sense? Is that true?
I think that's
That
part
would
of what
essentially
should
buy
be
him
included
some
in
more
the
time
case. Like,
to think
I
about
think
his
that should
legal
be part of
defenses. I don't think
the evidence,
that's going to
like-
be as significant as the time he's going to spend in custody pending trial. You know, once he does get back to New York.
just like his
And so
manifesto. Like,
what I do expect and
how is the
anticipate is
YouTube
that
video
at some
not
point he
the
will
same
be
as the
extradited
manifesto?
back to New York, whether he decides to waive
You know what I mean?
extradition or go forward with the hearing.
Whether or not you
It's
agree
gonna
with what the
depend, but more
manifesto
than likely
said,
he will be brought back here.
it's still
I
technically
highly,
evidence, and I
highly,
think that
highly
this
doubt
YouTube video
that a judge is
should
going to
also
set bail
be
on this
considered
case.
as,
I think
as
he's going to be held
evidence.
no bail, no release.
I think that's just
until
like
his
fact.
trial date,
I think
whenever
that's just
that
like
may be,
logical.
and
That's
he's gonna
not
have all that
me
time
trying to
sit and
say
think about what his defenses are.
there's
All
a
right,
conspiracy,
and we will cover it
even though
right here on
maybe
Sidebar and in Law and
it is me
Crime.
trying to say
Safa
there's a
Robinson Ferrer, thanks
conspiracy
so much
because,
for coming on. It was
guys,
great seeing you.
where else are you
Thanks,
gonna go
Jesse.
for
Thanks for having me.
conspiracies?
All right, everybody, that's all we have
You
for you
know
right
I
now
love my
here on
conspiracies.
Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.
Did he say in his manifesto that it was his plan to get arrested? I can't remember.